When nature inspires me to make a quilt, I get really fired up, and this idea came from sitting around a bonfire. I call it Embers. Let's get started. I'm hoping you're looking at the quilt behind me saying, oh my goodness, that is a crazy wild patchwork layout. But it is so simple. It's all done in strip sets and then squares. But check this out. I wanted you to be able to see the logs in my fire burning and turning to ash as you see the gray moving out, and then the orange and the yellow glowing as embers. And to do all of that, I actually used the Stonehenge Gradations Graphite Strip sets. These are the 2.5-inch package, but I also got myself 3/4 of a yard of the yellow and a yard of the orange from the same line so that I can kind of make some strip set sub packs to put in first. Let's do those. I want to show you how to cut them down. Real simple here. I had already been cutting some of my strips, so my edge has already been cleaned off here. But let's say you're coming straight from the yardage store, straight out of the washer, dryer, iron situation. A good idea is always to go ahead and lay your ruler down. And you know what? I should point out, I'm looking at this line always first because I want to make a good, true straight cut. Now, if you're not ambidextrous, you want to do that with your dominant hand. So I'm going to. So I've made a perfect cut because my fabric's folded up. Now I'm going to spin it around here and I'm going to measure 2.5 inches. And I'm going to cut all of my strips at 2.5 inches first. But the yellow ones, if you're looking behind me, they have a special trick. So not only did I make 2.5-inch strips for my yellow-orange strip sets, but I also am going to make these cut down into 1.25. So I'm going to go ahead longwise, keeping it folded. I should not have unfolded that. I just wanted you to see how much fabric was under there. I'm going to come down to 1.25 on my ruler, still looking at all of the lines to make sure it's nice and square. And then I'll take this, and because of that, I can use these parts in 2 individual strip set rows to make the orange and yellow glow come together. Now, I've already prepared a few of them for us here so you can see a little bit better what I'm talking about. There's those skinny ones, and it's a 2.5, a 1.25, a 2.5. And I'm going to make twice as many of these. I'm going to make basically 5 of these and about 2.5 of these, where I've got the 2.5, the 2.5, and the 2.5, all 3 colors represented, so that we can subcut down into 2.5-inch banks, so these will fit right into our pre-cut package. So I've got 4 of those made per every strip cut. I'm going to use 1 wide one and 2 of the narrow ones, but I got ahead of myself and I need to go ahead and make us some of these. So you can work from either end. When I'm sewing, if I'm making strip sets, I always sew from one end down to maximize the amount of fabric I have. So I'm going to go ahead and cut from this end. You can see all of those were lined up nice, and I'm just going to shave that selvage off. I don't use it for sewing, but I do use it for starting. And spin this around so I can get those 2.5-inch wide strips. And one of my tricks is I'm also looking, probably a little easier for you can see there, one of the things I'm looking at is I'm looking at these lines here, but I'm also looking at the way it runs across the sewing lines. That way it looks very nice and straight. And I need 2 of these for every 1 row of gray that I'm going to put into each strip set. And so I need to get a couple of these made, but I had a few made already. And I'm just going to organize these piles as I go so that I have 2 of the skinnies, 1 of the wide, before I cut into my grays. Now, listen, we're going to take this gradation packet, and I need to use it 2 different ways. I need to use it as 22-inch wide strips, but also 45-inch wide strips. So I want to go ahead and remove the packaging, and I'm going to take half of it, and I'm just going to set it aside for later. Okay? We're not going to touch any of that now. This other half over here, what I'm going to start to do is unfold it, and I'm going to start to stack them up to make 22-inch strips, and I'm going to cut about 4 at a time, and I'm just going to simply cut the fold out. Like yay, And I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna do that for all of these. And then I'm gonna mix, let me set these out of the way. I'm gonna want my ironing space. And I'd already been doing it with some of these lighter color ones too, because I had a few light ones left over from all of the quilting when I was done. I did not use every single strip set. I wanted to mix the shading to look like the logs burning out and whatnot. So these ones I've prepared are a little bit more lightly shaded. These are 22-inch strips. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through and choose 4 strips that are different. I'm gonna stack them right sides up so that all of my management is easy. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna spin it. I'm gonna line up this edge right over here to be as square as possible. And of course the caffeine's kicking in right now. I can feel myself getting a little silly. So one of my tricks is hold it, shake it out, bring it back down nice and flat. Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna also subcut these little strips. Okay, so again, we're gonna trim it. Now, I'm gonna make a 3-inch cut. I'm going to make a 4-inch cut. I'm going to make a 5-inch cut. And then I'm gonna come down here and I'm just gonna cut the selvage off, making sure I get all of my selvages off here. And then that, in essence, is gonna make all of these the same length. Now, you're doing this 7 times for 4 pieces 7 times over. You have a lot of fabric. I guarantee they will not all be the same length, but we're gonna have some trim, we're gonna have some fall off, so don't sweat that. Just follow each bank as you go. Keep all the banks of color in order so that you may bring them to your ironing surface. And now each log is its own log. So this color bank stays together, but I'm gonna start to reorganize my pieces so that I have a random patchwork. So why don't I take this one down? I'm gonna start to scramble here. Next row, I'm gonna bring a longer one over here, starting to mix. But you see how I'm pulling off from the row as I go, because sometimes the shades get very similar to each other. So this just helps keep it randomized. So when I look across here real quickly, I want it to look like a brick wall. I don't want it to look like everything's lined up. That way I don't have to line up anything later. Remember, this is supposed to be awesome random patchwork. Then I'm going to add in 1 of the wide, 2 of the skinny per log, per ember, but I'm not gonna always put them in the same place. So I can kind of come in here and start to pretend, okay, if I started with a wide one here, I'm definitely gonna start with a skinny one, and then a skinny one, and a wide one. And I just go through here and do the same thing and start to figure where I'm gonna drop these in, like yay, and then I go to the machine right sides together. Now, in order to keep them together, my brain is thinking, I always wanna look at the second piece. So this is the second piece. Doesn't matter where I start, but when I come to the machine, it's gonna spin into my machine. I have a 1/4 inch edge guide on right now, a foot control that's gone for a little walk. There it is. Oh, I was free motioning last. I've got to put my feed dogs back up. There we go. Okay. Then I'm gonna fold this open. My hand's gonna come over here and grab the next piece, making sure it's right sides together. And I'm gonna do this. Take your time to assemble these nicely. I know I'm going a little quick, but we're gonna start sewing all 4 of these rows together as well. So we don't want it to be too wonky. We will be making squares out of these, so the better we do, the better it looks. Okay, you see I'm coming all the way down those rows. Just adding on, adding on. So it's log, ember, you know, because you're building that fire. Then my last piece here. But pay attention, that was my last piece, and it was at the other end of my ironing board. But right now it's over here at the sewing machine. So I'm going to rotate that back around so that I continue my construction. I'm keeping them all in order. I actually take the time to iron them all at the end and start to put them back together so that I have this fantastic strip set row that's going to look like this when we're all done. Okay, so you can see here I have the 4 logs coming together with the embers. But I need to do one more thing to make it really terrific looking, in my opinion, is I want to add dark strips, solid strips to the outside. So the next step for that is where I go back to those pieces that I had not used. These are the ones that are the 44 inches long. I want to use 2 that are the same color whenever possible. So let's just pull these 2 right off the top for right now. I've already ironed this together nicely, so I am ready to go ahead and come down here and sew these on. Now the strip set is not 44 inches long, it's about 30 some. Nice math, right? So I'm gonna start past the selvage so that I can cut that off later. And then the scrap we're gonna use as we build our borders, as a matter of fact. So don't waste it. Just start up here nice and close to your selvage and the top edge of your strip set row. Let's lock these stitches in. And I'm gonna sew this on. And now, as I'm coming to the end over here, I'm going to go ahead and just lock that down. I'm going to spin this around. I'm going to grab the other strip because I always want to sew with the bulk of my block on my feed dogs. It's something I'm really getting into. I'm going to need my iron in a minute, so let's heat it up now. Slide all this stuff out of the way because I'm going to need this spot too. And then while that area is getting set up, I'm going to come back over here, put this last strip on this side, and you're going to do this to all 7 of your strip set rows. So they're all unique, all organic, but all similar in construction. All right, we're all but set here. We're going to lock that in as well. Now, as I bring this over to the ironing surface, technically I can be pressing to the dark side here. And I'm going to press these both out because what we're going to do is we're going to make squares. And from those squares, I'm going to show you a really cool trick. We need to get this all nice and ironed out. And what I did in my studio is I did all the steps for all the strips first before I went on to the square making or the next phases, so that I made sure everything really was the same size. I love to work in these Henry Ford style assembly lines for random patchwork when we're done, but you still want to make sure it assembles nicely so it quilts down nicely when you're done. I'm very proud of the way this one finished out. All right, but we do need to take the time to get those pressed nicely. Now, here's the trick. We do need to make squares. So let's come on over here. I'm right-handed, my very first trim, and I want to make sure I can use as much of my scraps as possible. Let me move this so you can all see a little bit better. I'm looking at the lines of my patchwork and the lines of my ruler to make sure everything's running as parallel as possible. I'm going to go ahead and make a nice straight cut through here. And like I said, I'm going to save this piece for later on. I'm going to need that. I won't need that. And now what I need to do is I need to measure from top all the way down. Better flip my ruler over so the numbers are legible. Okay, and it looks like I'm coming out at about 12 3/4 for myself, if I'm not including the pinked edges, and I like that idea. So I'm going to go 12 3/4. I need to make squares. So now what I really want to do is use a square to do that with. And I'm going to need 2 squares from each strip set row. And we said it was 12 1/4. So I'm going to come over here to my 12 1/4 line. And always best to measure twice, cut once. So I'm cutting, set that aside. 12 1/4 Uh-oh, got nervous. Got nervous. Good. 12 in my quarter. See what I did? I just used the other block to make sure I'm doing okay there. We're going to cut that. We're going to save this aside for later. That is what we use up into the borders. Now the trick with this is we're going to sew this back together so that our black edges are on opposite sides. So did you see that, how I spun that around like that? So I'm just going to take those and I'm going to spin it. And now I'm going to center it down in there because of the selvage lines like that. And we're going to go ahead and get these stitched together real quick. Around all four sides I'm going to go, and I'll be right back for you. Here I am in that fourth leg of that seam, and one of the things I'm doing whenever I sew these squares together is I'm kind of pulling on both corners slightly to make sure I have no ripple at that last corner. Not too worried about my seam allowances fold in any different direction. There's no way to really control that, right? And before I dog ear these corners, which is one of my next favorite steps, I just want to make sure you remember you're making your own personal size square. So when you measure top to bottom, don't worry about my math. I want your number to be the same tall as it is wide, so you have perfect squares, so that your black is able to be sewn onto opposite sides like that, so that we can cut these cool half square triangles. So I'm going to just kind of randomly dog ear these corners just to help later on, so I don't get a bunch of big corner points coming together. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I need a ruler that's going to be long enough. Unfortunately, I still have my square handy. I'm going to cut from edge to edge. Whoa, that's almost still barely not long enough. Let's get a better ruler here. I like my long, there we go. Because I don't want this to move around, and I don't want to move the first cuts until I've made the second cuts. So right now I'm going to go ahead and I'm looking at where those threads have crossed. I'm going to cut across here. Then I'm going to move my ruler, not my patchwork, so that I get 4 really cool new squares like this. Get the iron nice and hot because we're going to need that here in a second. But check this out. As they open up, this is how I'm getting these awesome random strips of the black. Now, normally, and we've got a really cool quilt we call the 3 Dudes, this is how we made this to get these black parts together. And of course, you can use this method to make it and have black squares. But follow me back to the quilt, if you will, please. That was one of the things I was really trying to avoid. I didn't want squares to come together. I wanted them to kind of look like, well, when I build a fire, I start with a teepee, and then I light it on fire, and I like to have all of that stacking of that wood. So I was looking for dark, heavy triangles of the black, not such square pieces. So I let these lines sometimes run long. And to do that, we're going to press these open to the dark side first. And of course, I'm not combining always the same block units. That's why we want everything to be back to that same size together. So all of these are the same size units. Because I'm mixing some of the dark ones with the light ones, the dark one with the light ones. The darker towards the center area, the lighter towards the outer area. But now I can come back in and I can do all of these fun, random, different designs and stuff so that all of the different squares go in all different directions. And so I just played and I played and I played with my blocks on my design wall until I kind of had my fire pit going. Now, I had those wonderful leftover tail pieces from the blocks, or from the strip sets I had made. I was able to cut these down into 5-inch strips and use everything I had left over to go ahead and make this really cool exterior border. Before I go too far, the interior border here is the yellow fabric, and I cut 3 strips that were 2 inches to put those in, but it's only here and then down the side, and then my border just comes up from the bottom and around. And I place the ember parts against the glowing yellow border, so they're always pointing out, because a lot of times at the end of the strip here, I would have the lighter color, so I try to cut them so they were always pointing out that way. And there were a few places I needed just a little bit more, and that's where I used those scrap pieces, like I said, from when we put these black parts on the sides of our strip set rows. So hopefully it didn't sound nearly as complicated as it looks, because I wanted to create this wild, random looking, glowing fire that is actually truly easy to create and quickly strip piece together. Wow, the machine quilting was done in our small square by square design, and I used this really cool gold, orange gold variegated thread to intensify the glow, to bring the whole message alive, because I believe every quilt tells a story, and I love telling mine right here at Man Sewing. Thanks for being a Man Sewing fan. It's great to have you out there encouraging me to create fantastic new content. If you've missed any of the videos, we've got links for you here and here. And while you're checking those out, make sure you're subscribed. We don't want you to miss any of the action.